right, everyone. Welcome to a status update, our YouTube videos for the podcast Final Boy Status. This is going to be a review for A Quiet Place. If you want to check out our full podcast on If We Could Survive A Quiet Place as Three Average Joes, check out our podcast. It's also on YouTube. You can also find it in, podcast platforms like Spotify. Final Boy Status is the name of it, but this time we're just going to talk about the movie, what we thought about it. It's been out a little while, so I think we've seen it a couple times in lieu of the second movie coming out. But how do you guys like this movie?
Oh man, what a question. Yeah, I mean, I personally like this movie a lot. I think that there is a lot to talk about and a lot in it. First of all, the premise of it, not to give too many spoilers away. I feel like we all
This is going to be a spoiler-free video.
Right.
That's what we're trying for.
No spoilers here.
Right, so definitely a much different premise than a lot of horror movies and a lot of suspense movies have come before it, which I think is much to the benefit of the movie. Mm-hmm. The story itself is very straightforward, very simple, so that really helps it as well. Something I really appreciate about it. Yeah, overall, it's just in my opinion, a very streamlined, a very, from pillar to post, just really, really good, keeps you on the edge of your seat. So I like that aspect of it a lot.
For sure. Yeah, I agree.
Oh, yeah, I agree completely. I think in the actual podcast episode, I described this movie as a lean, mean terror machine or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I really stand by that. I think this is a movie with no fat. If they could cut something, they did. It's very much basics. It's streamlined is such a good word for it. But to say something different from what's already been said,
right? Yeah.
The attention to detail cannot be overstated in this movie. There are so many things which I remember seeing it in the theater and kind of clocking some things where I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And seeing with interviews with like John Krasinski. This was of course directed by John Krasinski. He also co-wrote the script. But so many things were in interviews afterwards. He would kind of explain like, oh yeah, they would paint on the floorboards so they know which floorboards don't creak. So that's where they can step. In the movie, that's never explained, but you get this interesting detail of for some reason that certain floorboards are painted on and that's where they walk. Mm-hmm. Details like they play Monopoly, but they have like soft little felt things as the pieces. All of these incredibly small things. It's just very careful attention to detail being paid in every moment of this movie, which really goes to show you that everybody involved in the film was really on board. They knew what they wanted to accomplish and they knew how to do it, and they were willing to put in the work for things that might not even be noticed. I don't know that you guys would have even noticed like the floorboard thing if I hadn't called that out.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing that really has to be called out about this movie is Krasinski really proves himself as a director. He clearly had a vision for this and did a very good job with it. The actors are all incredible. The special effects are actually really good. Like for a monster that's completely CGI, that can really quickly go wrong. I think this monster holds up really well. I guess mild spoiler, but if you don't know there are monsters in A Quiet Place, where have you been?
Right. Under a rock.
So I think this is a well-oiled machine of a movie where everybody was on board, everybody was doing their job, and everybody was going above and beyond, honestly. Yeah. Like I said, especially in terms of like set deck and just some things there. That's stuff that some people don't even notice, and I don't offhand have in front of me who did that, but shout out to them. They knew what this movie required, and they were extra about it, and I really appreciate that.
They got it, for sure. I mean, just to agree with both of you guys 100%, and again, for the sake of, kind of bringing up a new topic, I think where this movie excels that most movies don't excel to this level is just the tension it builds. And I think if you think of tension like, a balloon being blown up. This movie, from beginning to end, this balloon is just getting big and it's starting to get wrinkly and it looks like it's about to pop. Like, it's so tense, and it's the most tense movie experience or movie theater experience I've ever had, is sitting there in the quiet, scared to eat, scared to breathe, like just so immersed in it. So honestly, it is a master at suspense. And inside of that suspense, because I think a lot of scary movies, kind of in the context of horror movies, because this is a horror movie, a lot of horror movies try to do this by having weird scenes where for 10 minutes the person is walking through the halls with a baseball bat, just like the director is like, this is super tense. And I think in some cases that can do it, but that gets old after a while. So this movie I see as a super breath of fresh air when it comes to finding suspense and different ways to find suspense in horror movies. And I think the premise just makes it so easy for this to be suspenseful, and the acting is so well done. Everybody, when there's a monster nearby and they're trying to be quiet, you can see the look on their face, you can see their determination and their willpower to just not make a single sound and to be super slow. And all the things you guys talked about brought together just makes tension that no other movie I can really think of off the top of my head has really achieved.
Yeah, we were talking about it we were talking about when we recorded the podcast episode for this movie. But this is the most unique theater experience I remember. Like, I've seen a lot of movies in theater. Some movies you forget like as soon as you walk out the door.
Yep.
I remember watching this, and I remember how I felt. It was a very singular experience. On that note, I want to bring up something else we talked about during the podcast, because I feel like it's relevant to sort of reviewing the movie. While this movie is masterful in terms of suspense, I remember one of the big complaints I heard about it when it came out is people complaining it's not scary. I do want to clarify. I do think this movie is scary.
Yeah.
I do think it has some very effective scares within it. But I would also point out that, like, the suspense level versus the scare payoff are not equal. That's something we talked about last night when we were doing the podcast episode. And I do want to reiterate it now. It's like, in terms of things to complain about within this movie, there's so few. It's such a good movie. There's so few things that you can look at that anything we say negatively is going to be nitpicky, but we also have to anticipate what you guys might care about. So I'm going to say that. I'm going to say, if you want the scare payoff to be at the same level as the tension, I don't think that's there.
Sure.
I don't think this movie has that going for it. So if you're somebody where what you love in a horror movie is the tension, this movie is so in your alley. Like, that's what I love about horror movies. I love the quiet. I love the tension. I love sitting on the edge of your seat going, oh no, something's wrong. Something's wrong. This movie has that in spades. But in terms of, like, true blue scary moments to make all of that tension pay off, I don't know that I would say that this movie lines up.
That's fair enough. And I think, it's mostly tension and then, 5% actual payoff for the tension. So I agree with you.
I would say the payoff in this movie ends up being far more emotional than fear driven.
Sure.
So, obviously that's another way this movie is very effective, is the emotional moments do hit.
Yeah.
This movie pulls no punches about making you feel things.
There's great emotional catharsis written into the characters and their relationships, and the family dynamic is a huge part of this movie, which makes it really sweet. It kind of makes it almost like a family movie, like you want to sit down and watch it with your family, even though your younger siblings are just gonna freak the fetch out. But it's just a nice story that is very relatable and enjoyable, I think. Usually with these movies, we like to rate on a scale of 13 because they're scary, and we watch and review horror movies.
The whole thing.
What do you guys think? Out of 13, what would you give it? Quiet Place?
if we start down here and go down the line, I assume.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I think this movie's phenomenal. So out of 13, I give it a 12. Like I said, it really hits all my buttons personally. So I can't pretend this is entirely objective. It's a little bit subjective, but at the same time, I think this movie knows exactly what it's trying to do and succeeds at doing that thing. So I think it's an incredibly successful movie. I think it's incredibly well made, and I would give it a 12.
Very nice. Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of great things about it. I mean, it's very unique in its premise and what it does, in the experience that you have in and of itself. I think as good as the monsters are in this movie, you know, it's about the family. It makes you care, makes you really feel, you know, like you're going through it with them, which is a lot of credit to the writers as well as the actors. So my score, I would give it 11 out of 13.
Cool. Yeah, and I think it's a great horror movie. It's very contained. It's very simple. Even though I think the premise is very unique, I don't know, a lot of the story and the things you see and the visuals are things you've kind of seen before, and I think there's a lot that is unique, but a lot that is basic but is really good at being basic. So I'm gonna give it a 10. It was really, really effective for what it was trying to do. Definitely not the best horror movie I've ever seen, but it was really good, and I enjoyed every second of watching it. So
Yeah.
I enjoyed it a lot.
I would say that if you're trying to get into horror movies, this is one of the best movies you could start
Good
with.
place to start.
Yeah, so thank you guys for tuning in. We're gonna try and do a review for A Quiet Place 2 as soon as we can, as soon as the three of us can actually get together and go see it.
Yeah, right.
We have weird schedules, but we're gonna try and make it work. And so yeah, you can check out our podcast on any podcast hosting services where it's less of a movie review podcast. We actually focus specifically on trying to figure out a way to survive horror movies.
Right.
But I think it's good fun. I have a lot of fun recording it with you gentlemen, so I think you would probably have fun watching it.
Absolutely. Again, it's Adam, Lanson, Luke. Catch us with Final Boy Status. Have a good one.